Good morning, everybody. On behalf of the co-organizers, Trudy Hodges, Christine Shivets, Karima Daoud, and Maha Yuradi, I would like to welcome you to Georgetown University in Qatar. Let me start by a confession. Many decades ago, when I started my career, I did not expect that we will need, and I underline the need, to talk about gender equality and gender in foreign policy in year 2024, because I considered that these issues would have been solved by now. That would have been my wish today, not to need to have this conference. However, unfortunately, this type of event is even more needed now. And why? We are at what the UN Secretary General called the brink of war with respect to a number of conflict areas in the world. This basically means that business as usual in foreign policy is no longer adequate and is no longer possible. In his address in March this year, the Secretary General stressed that despite evidence that women's full participation makes peace building much more effective, he also noted that women in decision-making roles is not the same, but falling. He said, and I quote, "The facts are clear. Women lead to peace." The aspirational goals that were set in 2015 as the Sustainable Development Goals, and which were co-signed by 191 countries in the world, had a deadline of 2030. 2024 is past the halfway point to 2030. Now, if we look at some of these Sustainable Development Goals, particularly Sustainable Development Goal 5, which refers to gender equality, it is even further away from being achieved than what we had 5 years ago before the COVID-19 pandemic, because at that time it was felt that at the current rate of change, it would take 140 years to achieve these goals. Now it's at somewhere around 170 years to achieve these goals. The key issue of gender equality is not only referred to SDG 5, which is specific for gender equality, but it's an integral part of every other SDG. For example, SDG 1, which is eradicating poverty, we see a disproportionately larger number of women live today under the poverty line than men. It is estimated that 1 in 10 women globally live below the poverty line. With this as a background, and in the context of Georgetown University and the specialization in teaching foreign service and preparing diplomats for their careers, the issue of gender in foreign policy and why it matters was an obvious choice for a conference. Having this conference in a region where the rate of change with respect to gender empowerment is one of the fastest in the world is even more important. Qatar has been in the lead of initiatives at the UN level, e.g. promoting the candidacy of a woman for next UN Secretary General. So all things came together to bring this conference here today. We are therefore delighted and grateful that so many prominent speakers have accepted our invitation for the event and that you, the audience, have joined us today. We chose to focus on 4 different interrelated themes. One is foreign policy formulation and why it matters. Second, diplomatic practice. Thirdly, and knowing that there is a flurry of international foreign policy fora in the last few months alone, including at the UN, at G7, that has focused on implications of AI, artificial intelligence, we could not but introduce a session that would look at the advantages and risk posed by AI and how to address them. And finally, in a world of major conflicts right now, and again, being at the brink of, I hope not, but possible wars, looking at what are the implications on women in conflict situations was also an obvious theme to take on board. Before I finish, since this will be my final event as the Distinguished Diplomat-in-Residence, I would like to thank Dean Masri for giving me the opportunity to be the inaugural Distinguished Diplomat-in-Residence here in Qatar. It has been for me an enormously enriching and interesting experience. I would also like to thank him for believing that the conference that you're attending today is a worthwhile initiative and for accepting to make it possible. Dean Masri, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you, Ambassador, for those wonderful remarks. Your Excellencies, members of the Georgetown community, dear friends, as Dean of Georgetown University in Qatar, it is my distinct privilege to officially welcome and thank you for coming to today's Hiwaraat Symposium. My heartfelt thanks to our distinguished diplomat-in-residence, Ambassador Androulla Kaminara, for that kind introduction and for everything that she has done. Ambassador Kaminara, throughout the course of your 40-year career, you have left an indelible mark on the field of international diplomacy. We are honored and grateful to claim you as a member of this community. Just a slight correction, you said as your final act as Distinguished Diplomat-in-Residence. Let me clarify, as your final act for this year as Distinguished Diplomat-in-Residence. We are not going to let go of you. I hope you know that. I'm immensely grateful to you for conceiving of, planning, and curating this incredibly important gathering. My gratitude is also to my colleagues, Trudy Hodges, Christine Shivitz, Maha Oredi, and Karima Dawood, for all their tireless efforts in helping us get to this moment today. Hiwaraat, as many of you know, is the Arabic word for dialogues, because it is through dialogue that we learn from one another, and it is through dialogue that we understand the world better and are able to plan for a better future. Today's dialogue on gender in foreign policy is our 7th event in the Hiwaraat conference series. Since we launched Hiwaraat in September of last year, we've convened dozens of experts and interested members of the public, thousands of interested members of the public, in an attempt to explore important, relevant, and timely questions. We've studied many of the most complex issues facing the world in general and this part of the world in particular. Our kickoff conference, held in the fall on the 20th anniversary of the US-led invasion of Iraq, explored the lasting impact of the war on both Iraq and the region. We followed that with conferences on Islamophobia, how Afghanistan is at an impasse, how water security in the Gulf faces unprecedented threats, how energy shapes the lives of people, and most recently, we came together to discuss the genocidal war on Gaza. Georgetown's presence in Qatar reflects and expands upon the institution's 2.25-century commitment to developing minds, discovering truth, and engaging with the world. This institution is uniquely positioned to lead these crucial and occasionally uncomfortable discussions. The diverse economic, social, political, and cultural traditions of this region provide us with an analytical framework that often pushes back against conventional wisdom and dominant foreign policy narratives. By offering diverse perspectives to the mix, we deliver on our promise to provide a world-class education in international affairs to our students, many of whom come to us from the Global South and represent more than 70 nationalities. The speakers we have convened today, who include distinguished diplomats, public officials, academics, and students, will discuss gender in foreign policy and in diplomatic practice. This session on AI in foreign policy and diplomacy will offer new insights into the risks that artificial intelligence is beginning to present in the diplomatic world, including issues with AI-generated deepfakes and their potential impact on elections or disinformation spread by bots of dubious political provenance. AI's role in diplomatic circles may not be as conspicuous as the increasing role the technology plays in adjacent areas, especially national security and military operations. For diplomats, AI's implications are simultaneously promising and perilous. Promising in as much as AI can help accelerate diplomatically led global initiatives seeking to address everything from climate risk mitigation to public health prevention and intervention strategies to food and water security. AI language models could be used to rapidly analyze vast troves of data related to complex diplomatic negotiations like climate treaties or nuclear non-proliferation agreements. Language models can then be deployed to identify key points of consensus and disagreement to inform the diplomat's decision-making. It's also perilous in as much as bad actors can deploy AI to spread disinformation and sow chaos, impersonating world leaders, for example, by creating deep fake text, things like media statements or speeches supposedly given to inflame tensions among nations. Or they could inundate social media with AI-generated misinformation aiming to polarize populations and undermine diplomatic efforts. Our final session, Gender in Conflict Situations, will explore the improved outcomes that occur when women are included in the conflict resolution process. Study after study from the International Peace Initiative, the Council on Foreign Relations, UN Women, the World Bank, Georgetown University, and others have shown that when women are included in peace processes, agreements are less likely to fail and are more conducive to sustainable peace. In part because women tend to prioritize issues like human rights, refugee assistance, and political participation and accountability in peace negotiations. Women build coalitions across political and ethnic lines, enabling societal reconciliation and reintegration. They are keenly attentive to issues like gender-based violence. The diplomatic field for centuries had been a man's domain, as exclusive and rarefied a club as could be found. Admittedly, this is now changing, but not fast enough. Although the School of Foreign Service was the first at Georgetown to admit women as regular students, it was not until 1954 that it did so. And it was only in 1969 that women were finally admitted to the college at Georgetown. Now, why is it important for the world that women assume greater leadership roles in the diplomatic and political arenas? It is because it is the natural thing to be and the right thing to happen. In point of fact, it should become a non-issue. Ambassador Kaminara was right in her opening remarks to have not expected many decades ago that we would need to talk about gender equality in 2024. But here we are. So let us together aspire and commit to a day when we do not need to have a symposium on gender in foreign policy or on gender, period. And so you've already heard briefly from one of the next generation female leaders. Moza Al-Hajri, who kicked off our program, is pursuing her degree in foreign service. She is majoring in international economics and minoring in Arabic. She's a debating champion and a formidable one at that. I have every confidence that she will continue to make her voice heard and be a powerful voice for women and men when, after she graduates, she embarks on a career. Moza is just one member of a cadre of young women who will be prepared to bring more gender balance to the diplomatic fields, because 7 in 10 of our students here are female. And I am incredibly proud and honored to be able to say this today at the Conference on Gender in Foreign Policy. For nearly 2 decades, Georgetown has been training next-generation leaders and diplomats in Education City in partnership with and because of the great vision of Qatar Foundation and its chairperson, Her Highness Sheikha Moza bint Nasser Al Mustad. Women and girls worldwide continue to experience overwhelming injustices. Gender abuse is most harrowingly expressed during wartime. Afghanistan, Gaza, and Ukraine will be our focus areas today. But it's important to remember that there are violent conflicts underway worldwide. In Sudan, in Yemen, in the Congo, in Ethiopia, in Burkina Faso, in Mali and Niger, Myanmar, Haiti, Mexico, and elsewhere. We have students from these and other countries whose friends, families, and communities have experienced firsthand the devastation of conflicts. Injustices directed at their women's bodies and at their babies and families are not just limited to war zones. Gender equality was a key plank in the UN 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But 3/4 of a century later, women throughout the world still have only 3/4 of the legal rights afforded to men. Women are the primary, usually unpaid, caregivers in multi-generational families. Worldwide, they continue to be denied economic and employment prospects. The state of Qatar has demonstrated unwavering and innovative global leadership on gender equality, as Ambassador Kaminara noted. More than ever, we need more women at the foreign policy table, and I can think of no better expression of our mission and values than today's discussion on gender in foreign policy. And no stronger an advocate and leadership role model for aspiring diplomats than Her Excellency Ambassador Alya Ahmed Saif Al-Thani, permanent representative of the State of Qatar to the United Nations in New York. While she's not able to be here in person today, she generously offered to convey a message for the event. Let's watch.
Dear colleagues, I'm pleased to participate virtually in this conference on gender and foreign policy at the invitation of Dr. Safwan Masri, Dean of Georgetown University campus in Doha. Let me start by stating that the role of women in international relations and diplomacy has undergone a significant transformation. Historically, women were largely absent from the decision-making tables of international diplomacy. However, over the decades, the persistent efforts of countless women and advocates for gender empowerment have dramatically shifted this landscape. The United Nations, since its inception, has played an important role in this transformation. For instance, in April 1993, the United States appointed Madeleine Albright as the permanent representative to the United Nations. At that time, she was the only woman on the Security Council and one of just 6 female permanent representatives in New York, in the United Nations in New York. Today, there are 47 women permanent representatives, with 5 of them serving on the Security Council. This progress is reflective of broader trends seen in many capitals regarding foreign policy. The UN Charter was one of the first international agreements to affirm the equal rights of men and women. The establishment of the Commission on the Status of Women in 1946 was a significant achievement on the road towards equality, development, and peace. Let us remember that the Commission on Status of Women played a fundamental role in the drafting of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Throughout the years, women's leadership in the United Nations has grown, and an increasing number of women have been appointed to decision-making posts. This has been possible due to the creation of institutions and norms within the systems. One of the critical moments in this journey was the UN Decade for Women from 1976 to 1985, which placed women's rights and empowerment of women at the forefront of the global agenda. The culmination of these efforts is perhaps best illustrated in the adoption of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action in 1995, a comprehensive policy framework aimed at advancing gender equality and women's empowerment. This was followed by the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women known as CEDAW, in 1979. The establishment of UN Women in 2010 through the General Assembly Resolution 64/289 marked a significant milestone, providing a dedicated mechanism to champion women's rights and the participation across all levels of governance, including equal participation in peace processes, security, and foreign policy. Crucial to the establishment of UN Women were the efforts of the non-aligned movement and the group of G77 in China, in which the state of Qatar has actively participated in. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, adopted in 2015, further emphasized the importance of gender equality, with Sustainable Development Goal 5 specifically aiming to achieve gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. This agenda recognized that sustainable development cannot be realized without the full participation of women and girls. There were also efforts to strengthen women's participation in peace and security, and in this regard, an important breakthrough came in the year 2000, with the adoption of the United Nations Security Council resolution known as 1325 on women, peace and security, urging all actors to increase the participation of women in all United Nations peace and security efforts. 15 years later, the state of Qatar funded the global study on the implementation of Resolution 1325, which concluded that the involvement of women in peace processes has positive and sustainable effects on the promotion and sustainability of peace and conflict prevention. Despite these advancements, the journey is far from over. The goal of appointing a woman as a Secretary General remains a significant focus of advocacy efforts. In 2015, the state of Qatar, along with a group of cross-regional countries, co-founded the Group of Friends for a Woman Secretary General. This group underscored the need for more inclusive and diverse leadership at the United Nations, reflecting the world it serves. Despite the nomination of 7 well-qualified female candidates, a combination of factors has, of course, including geopolitical ones, prevented this appointment. This group transitioned into the UN Group of Friends on Gender Parity, co-chaired by the state of Qatar and Rwanda, aimed at supporting the newly elected Secretary General pledge to achieve gender parity in all appointments at the senior levels of leadership at the United Nations. A series of notable firsts have been achieved, such as parity among the UN senior leadership and among, of course, heads and deputy heads of peace operations and resident coordinators. And, of course, these efforts are attributed to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who has kept his promise in reaching parity within senior level positions at the United Nations. The group strongly advocates for regional diversity, particularly emphasizing women from the South and including, of course, giving opportunities for women from the Gulf region. The group is now doing everything it has in its power to support the election of the first ever female Secretary General in 2025. This timely step will bring a new vitality to multilateralism and underscore a broader shift towards more inclusive and equitable global governance. The group is also pushing for an increased number of women to hold the post of the President of the General Assembly, noting that to date only 4 women have held the presidency of the UN General Assembly. Though the number of women permanent representatives have increased greatly, the UN General Assembly is still far from having a gender equal representation. Thanks to the efforts of a core group of member states, which included the state of Qatar, the General Assembly formally recognized this issue in June 2022, with the adoption of Resolution 76/269, proclaiming June 24th of each year as the International Day of Women in Diplomacy. This day is, of course, dedicated to celebrating not only at the United Nations, but also in capitals worldwide, serving as a platform to inspire and encourage more women to pursue careers in international relations and diplomacy. An integral part of this journey toward gender parity in decision-making roles at the United Nations is acknowledging the nexus between education and peace. The empowerment of women and girls through education, particularly in conflict-affected areas, plays a crucial role in peace-building efforts. In May 2022, thanks to the efforts of the State of Qatar in collaboration with the Qatari-based organization Education Above All Foundation, the UN General Assembly unanimously proclaimed September 9th as the International Day to Protect Education from Attack, marking a significant achievement in the promotion and protection of girls' education worldwide, especially in conflict-affected areas. Furthermore, in 2022, Qatar co-hosted the high-level global conference on youth-inclusive peace processes with Finland, Colombia, and the United Nations, focusing on the great role played by young females in peace building and peacekeeping processes. It underscores the critical role the female perspective plays in problem solving and peace. As we look to the future, continued advocacy for the empowerment of women and their inclusion in all aspects of international diplomacy remains greater. In this context, the State of Qatar is actively engaged in the negotiations for the Summit of the Future, scheduled for September 22nd and 23rd of this year. Proposed by the Secretary General in our Common Agenda report of September 2021, of course, the summit aims to advance the 12 commitments made by and committed by world leaders in the political declaration of the United Nations 75th anniversary, which was negotiated by the State of Qatar and Sweden. The anticipated outcome of the summit is an intergovernmental negotiated and action-oriented pact for the future. This pact will further discuss key global issues, including sustainable development and financing for development, peace and security, science, technology, and digital cooperation in global governance. The State of Qatar has been a strong player of making sure that the human rights and gender equality principles are part of the pact and part of the pact commitments. Excellencies, dear colleagues, I will conclude my remarks by reminding us that we meet today amid a terrible war in the Gaza Strip, which is, of course, impacting women and children significantly. They are suffering immensely, facing huge humanitarian needs, including being on the verge of famine and lacking the most basic necessities of life, with widespread violations of human rights. Ending this suffering and halting the bloodshed are at the core of the mediation efforts undertaken by the State of Qatar. We continue to work with our international partners to reach an agreement that guarantees a ceasefire, the immediate delivery of sufficient humanitarian aid and basic services, and the release of all detainees. We call for the immediate implementation of Security Council Resolution 2728, which demands an immediate ceasefire leading to a permanent ceasefire, along with other relevant General Assembly resolutions. This is the only way to end the suffering. The UN Security Council has recognized the State of Qatar's diplomatic efforts to achieve a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. This achievement not only reflects Qatar's position, but also highlights the international community's appreciation for our successful diplomacy and its contribution to promoting regional and international peace and stability. I thank you for this opportunity to contribute to this important conference, and I wish you all the best.